I was shocked to discover that Kenny, who hadn't even attended my mother's funeral, had unexpectedly flown abroad with $200,000. "What on earth did you do with such a sum?" I asked him. "Do you remember that grand piano we had at home?" "I sold it, man," Kenny replied. "Coming from a wealthy family sure had its perks. That was a fine piano. I never imagined it would fetch $200,000. It seems Kenny mistakenly thought that the grand piano at home was his. My condolences. The inheritance rights to the family estate are all mine. However, that piano was originally bought by our grandfather for my brother, and it still belongs to him. My brother, who's always loved the piano and now works as a piano teacher, left it at our family home because it was too big for his house. Given my brother's strong sense of ownership, he would be furious to know that something of his had been sold without his consent. Knowing my brother, simply compensating him won't be enough. When I told Kenny this, he hung up immediately. My name is Rachel Schneider. I'm a 45-year-old office worker. My family has a distinguished lineage that dates back to colonial times and is well known in our community. Moreover, thanks to my late father's successful business, we now own assets worth $9 million. Originally, my older brother was supposed to inherit the family estate. However, he had a girlfriend from a family that also required an heir. Desiring to marry her at all costs, he declared that he would give up all inheritance rights in exchange for not taking over the family responsibilities. This left me with the challenge of needing to find a spouse to continue the family name. Even though I had always wanted to be independent without relying on family wealth, I focused solely on my career. Before I realized it, I found myself in my mid-40s and still single. I needed to find someone, or a family line would end with me, so I took a leap of faith and attended a singles mixer. That's where I met my current husband. His name is Kenny, and he's surprisingly 10 years younger than me. Yet, at the party, he didn't pay attention to any of the younger women and came straight to me. "Are you sure you want to be with someone as old as me?" I asked him repeatedly, but Kenny looked straight into my eyes and answered, "I'm a bit shy and not very assertive. I've always been drawn to older, more grounded women." True to his words, Kenny gave off a gentle, reserved vibe. I felt that he could bring some peace to my assertive family dynamics. As our relationship progressed, there was something I had to tell him. My mother had been bedridden due to illness since last year, and I was taking turns with my sister-in-law, Catherine, to care for her. Wondering how to break the news since we were considering marriage given our age, I finally mustered the courage to tell him on our third date, and to my surprise, he gladly accepted and even proposed, expressing his willingness to help with the caregiving. His kindness deeply touched me, at least that's how I felt in the beginning. Kenny, who works as a daycare teacher, seemed genuinely committed. However, a few months into our marriage, he suddenly expressed a desire to quit his job. When I inquired about the reason, he looked remorseful and said, "Sorry, Rachel. The parents at my daycare are just too demanding, and there's a lot of complaining. I just can't handle it anymore." Understanding the challenges he faced, I would normally have encouraged him to persevere. However, with him already helping with my mom's care, I found myself unable to say a word. Adding to the complexity, I was 3 months pregnant. Wanting to get along well with Kenny for the sake of our unborn child, I adopted a lenient attitude. Unfortunately, my leniency led to regret. As I came out of the shower and attempted to enter the bedroom, I overheard Kenny whispering on the phone. The content of his call shocked me to the core. I managed to get married without her finding out I'm unemployed. She totally believed me when I told her I quit my job, when in reality, I quit like 2 years ago. It sounded like he was talking to one of his buddies, who responded, "Man, you're really something." Well, Rachel's family is pretty wealthy around here. I thought I hit the jackpot when I saw her at that dating event. But then again, given her age, I was probably the only one to approach her. The revelation left me feeling deceived. Was the gentle Kenny I knew all just an act? Despite the desire to confront him immediately, the thought of our unborn baby rendered me speechless. Discovering Kenny's true intentions shattered my confidence in our future. Today, Catherine, my brother's wife, will be taking care of my mom until 5 o'clock p.m. And then it's my turn. Pondering whether I should confide in someone about Kenny, that's when Catherine spoke to me, noticing my troubled expression. Rachel, you look down. If something's troubling you, please share it with me. She's such a kind person, having taken care of her own mom for years, and she's really good with mine too. I confided in Catherine about Kenny, and she listened intently to my story. She reassured me, saying, "It's good you talked. Keeping this to yourself could have been harmful to your unborn child." I apologized for burdening her, but she responded with understanding, "No worries. Talking doesn't necessarily solve everything, but it surely lightens the load." Catherine seemed genuinely concerned, almost as if the situation were her own. Suddenly, the doorbell rang, and without waiting for a response, Kenny entered. Both of us were taken aback, but Kenny acted as if nothing was amiss and smiled, saying, "Rachel, I'm going to help with your mom's care from today. You're not in the safe period yet, so I don't want you straining yourself." Kenny was putting on the act of a gentleman in front of me, and I reluctantly agreed. When Catherine tried to offer assistance, Kenny spoke first, questioning, "I've been meaning to ask, why are you taking care of your mother-in-law in this house?" He used the same tone he used on the phone. Catherine explained the situation, but Kenny started saying horrible things to her. He accused her of trying to curry favor and insinuated that she'd be upset for not getting a piece of the inheritance if she married into money. Enraged by Kenny's harsh words, I wanted to leave the room, but Catherine signaled with her eyes not to. I reluctantly stayed quiet, watching the scene unfold. Kenny's attitude escalated, and he declared, "This family's wealth belongs to us, my wife and me, so I'll take care of my mother-in-law by myself from now on." Realizing it was pointless to say anything more, Catherine left the scene. I quietly slipped outside, feeling the weight of Catherine's hurt. I pondered how to extend my apologies to her. Meanwhile, Kenny took over the responsibility of caring for Mom entirely. Despite my offers to assist, Kenny insisted that I shouldn't intervene. He merely outlined the basics of caregiving. But his negligent approach resulted in tragic consequences. Our mother passed away. The funeral took place in a church where generations of our family found their final rest. However, Kenny disappeared from the day of Mom's passing. Despite my attempts to locate him amidst funeral preparations and arrangements, his absence perplexed relatives and neighbors alike. Catherine, tearful before the altar, apologized for entrusting Kenny with caregiving responsibilities. Approaching Catherine in her distress, I attempted to offer solace. "Catherine, please don't blame yourself. It's not your fault," I insisted. She shook her head, anguish evident in her voice. "No, Rachel, it's not your fault. But where on earth is that man? I wanted to confront him today, and he vanishes just as Mom passes away." Agreeing with Catherine's sentiments, I reflected on Kenny's frequent absences during his supposed caregiving duties. Neighbors mentioned his frequent departures from the house, casting doubt on his commitment to the task. They even noted the arrival of a large truck on one occasion. Though curious, I refrained from probing further amidst the funeral proceedings. Days passed, and Kenny remained absent. Then, unexpectedly, a call from Kenny disrupted my thoughts. "Hey, Rachel, I'm currently at a luxury hotel in Europe," he nonchalantly announced. Stunned, I demanded an explanation for his absence from Mom's funeral and his current whereabouts. Kenny's response was unexpected. "I spent $200,000. The mention of such a sum immediately triggered memories of the grand piano at our family home. "I sold it, man. It was a good one. Who would have thought it'd go for $200,000? It turned out that Kenny had sold the family's grand piano and was using the money to travel around Europe. The piano, which Mom said was a family heirloom, was indeed worth around $200,000. Apparently, the hotels Kenny booked were all quite luxurious, and he had quickly spent all the money. I never imagined Kenny would do something like this while supposed to be taking care of Mom. Our family home had tight security, but with family, it's a different story. The truck that had been at our home must have been there to transport the piano. Why on earth are you doing something so selfish? The whole family was worried about you since you weren't at the funeral. I confronted Kenny, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. Well, you know when you have a kid, you won't have much free time anymore. You have a job, so I guess I got to be the stay-at-home dad, Kenny replied, surprising me with his nonchalant attitude. It's good that he wants to take on child rearing, but he seems intent on leeching off of me. Moreover, it appears Kenny mistakenly thought that the grand piano was mine. I explained to him that the piano originally belonged to my grandfather, who bought it for my brother. So the current owner is still my brother. Oh, is that so? You scared me there. It'll be fine if I just apologize to your brother later, right? Kenny seemed to lack any guilt about selling someone else's belongings. Well, Kenny has only met my brother at our wedding, so it's understandable he's unaware of my brother's intimidating nature. My brother works as a piano teacher, and ever since he was a child, he loved the piano. He pleaded with our grandfather to buy that specific piano, though currently there isn't space in his house for it, which is why it's at our parents' house. Yet he's still the owner. While working at a piano school, he has also expressed his wish to start his own school using that very piano. The piano means more to him than anything else. I can only imagine what kind of punishment he would impose on Kenny after hearing that it was sold without permission. By the way, my brother has a strong personality and hates dishonesty. I continued explaining. Kenny remained silent throughout. When he finds out you sold his cherished grand piano, mere compensation won't cut it. My brother's not just strong-willed, but he doesn't settle for compromises either. I pondered the kind of punishment awaiting Kenny after our tense phone call abruptly ended. With a stern warning, I knew he was probably feeling regretful, racking his brains for explanations. Without delay, I called my brother and recounted everything about the call. Needless to say, he was livid. The next day, as Kenny rushed home and entered from the front door, his eyes widened at the sight of everyone gathered in the living room. What's going on? Why is everyone here? He stammered in confusion. I had orchestrated the timing so that the whole family would be present when Kenny returned. My brother, along with his wife Catherine, fixed Kenny with a menacing glare. Kenny, I heard everything from Rachel. What were you thinking? Selling someone else's property, especially something that valuable, without consulting the family? My brother's voice was cold, cutting through the tension. Visibly nervous, Kenny tried to justify himself, claiming he was just trying to help with chores out of boredom when he stumbled upon the old grand piano. Really? That piano was special, imported by our grandfather from a top European manufacturer. Where's the money from the sale? My brother's stern expression demanded answers. As expected, my brother was playing the role of an interrogator, hoping to elicit a confession. Kenny hesitated, lost in thought, before stammering, the sale's money. Yeah, it hasn't come in yet. It was a feeble attempt at an excuse, and my brother's anger erupted. You're lying. Just how rotten are you? He thundered, his disappointment palpable. Pointing out Kenny's souvenir-laden suitcase from Europe, my brother accused. What's with those souvenirs? I'm sorry, I used up all the money? Kenny's admission silenced the room, the shock evident on everyone's faces. Spending $200,000 on an overseas trip seemed unfathomable. My brother, with controlled intensity, confronted Kenny. I think you already know from Rachel, but that piano was mine. Now that it's gone, you're going to pay back every single penny. If you can't, I'm going to sue you for theft. You okay with that? His words hung heavy in the air, his demeanor reminiscent of a mob boss. Kenny, clueless about the law, looked to me for help, pleading in a pitiful voice. What did he expect me to do? I had nothing to do with this. It was all his doing. When I rejected Kenny's attempt to justify selling the piano, he began saying something ridiculous. Don't be so cold. I took care of your mom while you were pregnant. I just thought of the trip as a reward for myself after taking care of her. Let's just say we both decided to sell a piano. Since we're siblings, it won't be theft, right? I was so dumbfounded that I couldn't close my open mouth. Catherine came to my rescue, stating firmly, "Enough is enough. Didn't you tell Rachel not to come for caregiving? You even told me you thought I was just after the inheritance and tried to drive me away. What did you say such awful things to my wife too?" Kenny admitted to his insulting behavior towards Catherine, but my brother's anger flared again. "Listen up. The reason my wife took care of Mom was because she didn't want to go to a facility. My wife had experience caring for her own mother, so she kindly agreed to do it for mine. Money is a later issue. First, apologize to my wife right here, right now." Grabbed by the collar, Kenny, with tears in his eyes, knelt down in front of Catherine, saying, "I'm so sorry, Catherine." Despite Kenny's apology, all the relatives looked at him with cold eyes. One of them shouted, "You better pay back the money from the piano sale as soon as possible. We can't have a criminal in the family. It'll tarnish the Schneider's name." Kenny, misunderstanding once again, made another odd remark saying, "Right. We can't have a criminal in the family, right, bro? So let's keep things calm. We'll save money together as a couple and pay back little by little." At Kenny's nonsensical interpretation, even my uncle was left speechless. Realizing that no matter what was said, it wouldn't resolve anything, I decided to fetch something from my room. Since the incident on the phone when Kenny was talking with a friend, I had the business card of a divorce lawyer ready. "Kenny, call this number. I want our relationship to be over. From now on, let's communicate through lawyers," I said as I thrust the card at him. His face turned pale, and Kenny exclaimed, "Why? We're about to have a baby, and yet, why are you doing this?" At that moment, I revealed what Kenny had been talking about with his friend on the phone. "Wait, you've heard that? It was just a joke. You think that excuse will fly?" I responded, "I've known from the start that you approached me for my inheritance." Everyone present gave Kenny a cold stare, realizing there was no way out. Kenny retorted with a defiant attitude, "Darn, I thought I was going to get close to $9 million after we got married. I researched how much your mother left you." The sudden change in Kenny, who had always seemed so gentle, shocked everyone. Perhaps I should have been suspicious of a man like him from the beginning. I met Kenny at a dating event, and despite being 10 years younger, I thought we married for love. But his betrayal hurt me deeply. From now on, Kenny would be a stranger to me and my brother, so naturally, he had to pay back the money from selling the grand piano. Kenny broke down, saying he couldn't do that. But with all the relatives present willing to testify against him, there was no escaping the consequences. However, I assured him that I wouldn't ask for child support. "Really? Well, at least I'm grateful for that," Kenny responded. "In return, Kenny, you'll have nothing to do with this child. This is my child alone. You can't even claim to be its father," I firmly stated, placing my hand on my belly. Upon hearing this, Kenny looked devastated and collapsed. Since the divorce, he had been living in poverty, working odd jobs. One day, my phone rang, and it was Kenny. Despite not wanting anything to do with him, he kept calling, so I reluctantly answered. "Rachel, please help me," Kenny pleaded in a pitiful voice. He explained that the buyer of the grand piano he sold wanted to return it and get a refund. When Kenny sold the piano, he had claimed it was in pristine condition. However, there was a large engraving on the back made by my brother, claiming ownership. Kenny hadn't checked the back and likely sold it through a shady dealer. Now facing the consequences, Kenny had to return $200,000 to the buyer, and with what he owed my brother, it was a substantial amount. He later tried to file for bankruptcy, but my brother and I took legal action to stop him. Now burdened with even more debt, Kenny worked day and night doing manual labor. Eventually, the grand piano was safely returned, and my brother put a strong lock on the room where it was kept, even installing a security camera. "No one's going to touch that piano until I start my piano lessons," my brother declared, unchanged from his childhood. He expressed his wish to start a piano school at our family home, so I decided to discuss sharing our mother's inheritance. Catherine, my brother's wife, had taken care of our mother, and I felt guilty about inheriting everything by myself. Thanks to my brother agreeing with my decision, it seems we'll continue to have a good relationship with his family in the future. Blessed with a long-awaited baby girl, I became a single mom, but Catherine, who is already done with her parenting, is fully supporting me. My brother said he's going to step in as a father figure for my daughter, and he's excited about it. His influence has led his two adult daughters, who love the piano, to become kindergarten teachers. They have also come to adore my daughter. I feel fortunate to be supported by such a warm family, and with gratitude to those around me, I intend to live strong with my daughter